welcome. I think that we're the first working group to actually hold a meeting, maybe. I don't know if Windows has or not. They created a project on GitHub. Who wants to take notes? Anybody?
I'll try. I know I'm going to
Okay.
be a little behind on names and whatnot for stuff. I'm not sure
That's
how
fine.
it go, but let's see how it goes.
Yeah, we'll just do it in Markdown or RST, whatever you're more comfortable with. And I put a link to the working group directory that we have on the community GitHub into the Zoom chat. That's where we're going to upload it afterwards, if you don't mind.
All right. Well, let's see.
I can send it to you on Slack if you prefer.
Just
put it in the cloud.
Seeing how Zoom does here. There we go.
Let's go around and introduce ourselves. I am Daniel Wallace. I formerly worked at SaltStack. I worked on Salt Cloud before I worked at SaltStack. I worked on Salt Cloud a little bit while I worked at SaltStack, and I have done a little bit with it since I left. I'm now working for Autodesk, and I just want to see Salt Cloud improved. Let's go with Ben next.
Hi, I'm Ben Gridley. I've worked with, right now I work for Koali, which is a company in Utah, based out of Utah. And before then I worked for Entrata, where I was introduced to SaltStack, and I've been using it for configuration management. And I'm a sysadmin mostly. And my new company, we do all AWS. And so I'd like to improve Salt Cloud. I've written a few execution modules, created some patches that we apply internally, and like to figure out how to get some of this stuff into the actual code base.
Okay, Peter.
Sure. Oh, I am unmuted. Good. I am, right? Not used to how Zoom tells me these things. Great. Hey, so my name is Peter Norton. I've been working for a company called, Librato, then AppOptics, and now SolarWinds Papertrail, basically infrastructure SaaS companies. We started moving from more ad hoc stuff to SaltStack and Terraform, basically, as the platform we've got about 4 something years ago. And so we've been in this slow transition to building on it. I've got a number of concerns about how Salt works, or things that I wish were different maybe, but it does an extraordinarily good job of what it is. And Salt Cloud's been part of that most of the time. But what we've done internally is we've built runners that hit the cloud, hit the master, hit the minion data, just in order to get a launch to be as simple as we'd like just kind of like put the guardrails on and get things going exactly where they're going. And I feel like the usability of Salt Cloud in general is, it's definitely opted more for flexibility, and I'd like to find ways of either writing better guidelines for how you might want to make it so that you can put like something on the rails and just get it to exactly where it has to go, rather than have this whole wide open world. That may be a little over focused on AWS, which is where almost everything we have is, but it's kind of like probably would be similarly useful for other clouds. Anyhow, that'd be me.
All right, Tyler.
Hello, I'm Tyler. I'm currently working on Core at SaltStack. And before then I was a junior sysadmin at BYU, and then I did some Python at some other places, and now I'm here. I'm new to Salt Cloud, but I'm hoping to get up to speed and be able to help you guys out with what you need.
All right. Swaminathan? Is that how you pronounce your name?
Yeah. Hi, Danny. You can call me as Swami.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Yeah.
You want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, sure. So I'm an AWS and SaltStack certified, and I'm a SaltStack certified engineer. So I've been using with SaltStack almost 4 years. On Salt, we use probably more provisioning stuff with Salt Cloud module, with VMware, OpenStack, and AWS, etc. So, and prior to Salt, I was using Chef. So I can, so the main intention is like how we can improve, as Peter said, like how we can improve the Salt Cloud. And so if I need to do something better for the Salt Cloud, so that is the reason I'm here today. And I do more DevOps. I'm getting into Docker, but most of our applications is into monolithic. So basically from financial fintech background. So they don't get into advanced computing, but they still have the monolithic. So with Linux, it is we are using it. I'm comfortable with Oracle Enterprise Linux OEL and CentOS, both one similar. So Ubuntu, I'm not very much comfortable, but I was using it before. And Windows as a just as a development environment. That's it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Last but not least, Cedric.
Hi guys, I disabled the video because it got my Chromium crash every time I enabled that, Jones. Sorry for not having pictures.
No
so
worries.
I'm working at SUSE, and I'm a libvirt contributor mostly. And
Nice.
I stepped onto the Salt side of things a year ago. And over there, I revamped the virt modules for Fluorine, because I'm using them in the System Manager. And I haven't touched cloud modules yet, but maybe I'll be of some help on the libvirt stuff, because I think cloud uses some of them. So that's
Cool.
it for me.
All right, great. So let's get started. I only have two real things on my agenda to start with. Number one is the first thing that I would really like to do for the next. So the way that the working groups are going to work, from my understanding, is we're basically going to come together around an idea that we want to do for one release of Salt. Salt usually iterates every 6 months. There have been some times in there where like 2016.11 happened, and then 2017.3 got pushed back to 2017.7, and then 2018 we had .3, and then we didn't have another one until 2019.2. So it's rough. They want to it's basically want to release when it's actually stable, so we kind of have a little flexibility with that 6-month time window. So I was thinking, to get an easy win for the first iteration of this, what we should do is we should focus on standardizing what we have now, which does mean that even if you are on AWS, we will need to do some work for some other modules. Right now, I think there's like 20 or 25. There's a handful of, it might be, yeah, there's probably about 25 in there, without counting them. And we will need to work with those as well. But what I want to do is we need to come up with a list of things that need to be in a cloud provider, because there's not a lot of good documentation about writing new cloud providers. And then we need to standardize all of them. So I was hoping that's what we could do first. Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
So how much of this already has oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Peter. So the release which you are talking about, is that you mentioned about Salt Enterprise or the Salt Community Edition?
No, Salt Open. The github.com/saltstack/salt. We're not doing anything with Enterprise. That's all the company.
Okay.
Actually, that does, sorry, as a tangent or a build coming off of that question, does anything that happens in open get used in enterprise? I really don't know anything about the code bases.
Enterprise is built entirely on top of open. So what they do is they make a new file server, and basically there's a thing called RAS. And what RAS does is it basically supplies a file server and a returner, so that when you publish a command to it's a file server, a returner, and I don't know how they publish commands down, but basically it just sits on top of regular Salt masters.
Right, but it does the scale out management consistency, right?
Kind of. So like you can still do scale out with Syndix in Salt Enterprise. What it does is it allows you to tie together multiple Salt environments. So if you have like 5 different environments that each have their own Salt master, and you don't want to connect them. Let's say that you have a DevOps team, and that's like, so at Autodesk we have like a whole bunch of different companies that are together. We have Building Connector that was just purchased. We have PlanGrid, and then we have the Autodesk proper. Let's say that each one of those had a Salt master. You could have, they didn't want to share. You could then have Salt Enterprise live on top, and it could talk to all 3 of them. So you have a centralized location for all of your Salt deployments.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So sorry. So my actual question there was going to be, how much of this has already got issues open on GitHub, and how do we want to handle distribution, picking up of work, and how much time do we, each of us, think we could dedicate to this, and sort of like what kind of checkup cadence? Because the downfall of most open source things is big goals and lack of really good, tight feedback loops. Yeah, so that's why I want to start with this smaller goal of just documenting them. And that's going to be, so we're going to make a project on that community Slack that I linked, or the community GitHub that I linked. And we'll make a project there, and we'll just, we'll need to make a task for creating documentation on what it takes to be a provider. And then we'll need to create tasks for all of the cloud modules to make sure that they all are compliant with that. So regarding the documentation, like I had a fun adventure the other day. I think this will feed back into what I'm asked about for the user experience. A fun experience of, wanting to add a feature to, the specific feature was being able to launch instances with encrypted disks in AWS, which is there in the API. But the end result was we were really stymied on it because we couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. And it turns out, oh, look, Salt has a default API version, to interact with in the AWS API. And while it's pretty much invisible, it exists. And, if you ask for the older API version, it will reject fields it doesn't understand, right? Yeah. And fixing that involves saying, hey, actually, this is totally settable from, almost everything is settable from the cloud profile, but there's not a whole lot of examples of that if you search for it. How do we surface that sort of thing? How do we make it either more findable or just provide examples, or maybe bump that version to whatever's the most recent? Because I don't think we rely on anything older in Salt Cloud. Yeah, so there's no reason we can't just do that as ad hoc alongside this. We can, but also just documenting what things go into the profile, because that's a weird, the way it's described in the documentation doesn't reflect a whole lot of the power that it may have in the code or how it's supposed to be used, which I think, like I said, might feed back into your goals. That's part of the problem, is that we've never actually focused on documenting Salt Cloud. It's just not a thing that has ever happened. It was originally written, Tom Hatch started it back in like 2012. And my problem with Salt Cloud is that it only launches cloud instances, because it was written in 2012 when that's all you could do on like AWS or SoftLayer or whatever was available at the time. You could create cloud servers and that was it. There was no RDS, there was no queues, there wasn't any of that stuff. So it was written then, and then it was kind of passed off to Joseph Hall. And he went on and he created a whole bunch of cloud providers and just didn't really document them because that wasn't the focus at the time. The focus was pumping out a bunch of cloud drivers so that we could say, look at this thing, you can build multi-cloud deployments with Salt in 2013. So basically, to answer your question, the place that we should document it is inside of the doc string at the top of the ec2.py file. Because that's where you document, just like
other modules, you document it at the top of the configurations that you have for that module. And then each function should be documented as well.
But there's also an opportunity to just talk about what the scope is of a provider in general, because I think that
Sure.
the ideas are still a little bit abstract. So I guess that's part of what I was trying to say, is that the provider and how it gets used, how that configuration gets used in each bit of provider's implementation code is probably really different. But the overall idea that here's a grab bag of stuff that you might want and some examples of it. And
Right.
the hard part is, when you do the code dive, is that you're not clear. It's not clear where it might get used in the code either, because it's easy enough to find the strings, but until you actually realize you have a problem to solve with it, why it's there or what it's supposed to do is a little bit.
That just needs to be documented for each cloud provider. Yeah, we can add that to the list. That would be the thing that I want to standardize is the fact that cloud drivers are meant for building servers and actions on servers. The extra stuff where like there's functions to create, I think there's some of these that have the ability to create networks as part of like a function that you can call from the command line is secondary. Like that's great to have, but it's not what it was originally written to do. A lot of that stuff was written to make it like you can do it, but that's not what we want to document. Like we want to document building cloud servers, like all the other stuff we're going to do later. I definitely want to do like building RDS and all those things and making it more like Terraform-y, but better than Terraform. But for our first goal, we should focus on documenting what a cloud provider should look like and what it does, and then kind of guidelines for how you actually document your provider when you write a new one.
Yeah, when you mention about the actions along with the provisioning, so it includes the start, stop of the instance as well. So it is like on our Salt Cloud, I see only for VMware they support, but if you think about AWS, I think
AWS has those actions.
Yeah,
AWS has start, so they're all supposed to have start and stop. They're all supposed to have create. They're supposed to have request instance, because you have to have request instance in order to be able to bootstrap a server after it's been created somewhere else. That's the way that we wrote it and never documented it. Yeah, all those other actions that are pertaining, we need to come up with a list that's like, these are the ones that happen that need to be in a cloud provider to say that it's supported.
Now, I have another question, and more to the philosophical, and this is all probably, this may be a parking lot thing. Well, really two questions. One, of course, where does Kubernetes fit in with the idea of being a cloud, and how does that work? Because I know there are Kubernetes, runners out there, et cetera, and where does that fit in with cloud at this point? And the second question is Terraform. As you mentioned, you want something better than Terraform, but in my opinion, it's going to be hard to do better than Terraform given the ecosystem, because Terraform isn't just managing or launching servers. And there's some stuff with Salt SSH for doing stuff
all
right.
All that's later. All that's later. Both of them are item 2 on my agenda. So this is all this stuff is my goal for the next Salt release. We want to have it documented so that if someone comes in and says, hey, we have this custom cloud that we have in-house, I need to write a cloud provider that or a cloud driver that is able to interact with this thing. They don't have to go code diving to other cloud drivers in order to see what they actually need to create. So which cloud provider will be targeting as a first priority? Or for documenting them? So we're gonna start with documenting what a cloud provider needs to have, and we're gonna document how to create a cloud provider, and then we're gonna go through and make sure that all of the cloud providers conform to that standard.
So in order to do that, I think the question is there a template? Is there currently a best case, or is there a set of is there a set of providers right now that together we could use as our target, or do we have to actually go through the matrix of all?
So the one The AWS one is, or the EC2 provider is probably the one that has all of the stuff that we should be looking at. But we will need to go through like and probably DigitalOcean as well. But we just need to like some of these other ones like ProfitBricks, Proxmox. And even if we can't sit down and fix them, we need to document why they're wrong or not fitting the standard. And then we need to go to the people that originally wrote them and ask them to update them. So I'm not saying that we need to write the code for all of these. I just want to have, this is a rigid standard. We'll have a list of ones that conform to this standard. And then we can go out to the rest of the community at large for people that like the Zen one. I don't have a Zen server. I'm not going to spin up a Zen server, but I know who wrote it.
What about
just start marking them as unsupported by the Cloud Working Group?
There we go. That's what I was going to ask about.
Yeah.
Clouds that have disappeared. We have a few servers, for instance, on what are they called? One of the IBM cloud. No, one of the IBM clouds.
SoftLayer.
Yeah, and they've pretty much deprecated an entire API, an entire set of APIs that they're still sort of sitting out there in zombie land because they still work better than what IBM provides, et cetera, but probably should just be shot and left to die.
Yeah, there's also a Joyent cloud driver which end of life later this month. The whole cloud. Yeah. But yes, eventually the goal is to say that this is the standard. If someone wants to submit a new driver, it needs to follow these guidelines. It needs to have at least this stuff. And if it has this stuff, it will be supported by the Cloud Working Group. If it doesn't, then we're not going to support it.
So do we want like a meta tester for that, just to make sure that all the requisite APIs are there and the tests are in place?
Yeah, we want to double check that all the specific functions are there. That'll be one of the tasks. So I just need to, my plan is to kind of take it out and then send an email to the working group and just go like, hey guys, this is the plan. Start picking up stuff that you want to do. We just got to start, and most of it will be like checklist stuff. Does it have these things?
So this is Nick Garber. I missed the first few minutes. What you're describing sounds really good. I mean, especially like the vision between what Peter and Daniel are describing. Like, I can definitely see how they tie together. But just in terms of getting started, what is the is there like a template? Is there a form? Okay, so that's part of what we'll be designing.
Correct. Yeah, that's the plan. So it's kind of it's not like a thing that we can do overnight. It's a thing that's going to take a couple months, especially since I think most of us are working on this in our spare time. But it is a thing that's achievable for the next release of Salt, not Neon, the one afterwards. And it's a thing that would be valuable for not only us, but for anybody that like a new cloud pops up and wants to support.
Yeah. I dig it. So in terms of how to approach that, are we looking at sort of like what's out there and putting it in the blender and then sort of doing like spectral analysis in order to see like, what's already out there? Are we kind of looking at like, these are the shadows on the wall. We want to look at like the ideal cloud provider and then build from there. Some combination of the two.
That's the second one is more the idea. Some combination of the two is probably correct. I don't want to leave stuff out that people want, but there's certain like stuff like what is it, like Joyent or someone, Vultr, doesn't have the idea of security groups, so saying create security group has to be part of a provider is not, we don't need to do that. We need to, I want to strip it down to like, what's the bare minimum to be a cloud provider? And that's a create command, an avail sizes command. Okay, cat. I have a cat that's attacking me. And he's wrapped in.
The cat was snubbed as a member of the working group and is taking its revenge.
There's the cat. Like avail sizes so that you can use -- list sizes, avail images, list locations if that's possible, start, stop, create, request instance, stuff like that.
Okay.
Stuff that's like generic to any cloud provider, because like every cloud provider has to have the ability to list images. If you can't list images, you can't build because you don't know what your images are. My goal is to narrow it down to like those things, and we'll have a ticket where we just kind of like, hey, let's go through and look at some of them and come back and bring the things that you think should be in all of them.
Okay, so
We'll write go ahead.
oh yeah, so just to help me visualize, are you imagining that we might have something like a cloud provider-based class, and then it would be implemented by
Yes.
particular providers?
Kind of. The problem with that is Salt doesn't do classes. Salt does modules.
Not for most things, but there are some classes in there.
There are, but we're not going to do that for Salt Cloud.
Okay.
We have to
Okay.
rewrite all of it. Like I wrote classes when I originally wrote the first Nova driver, or the rewrite of the first Nova driver, and it's terrible. It's awful, and we're deprecating it for that reason. It's a nightmare to update, and it just doesn't work. But
Okay.
it gave me some good ideas on what we should do, and I definitely think that so what I want to do is I want to have like a file that's like, hey, this is what it should look like, and then like pseudocode of what it should do. Because the provider is the thing that like bootstraps the server as well. And if you forget to include bootstrapping the server in your provider or your create function, you can create a server and it won't appear in Salt.
Mm-hmm. So questions here, other relevant questions, hopefully. So Salt is dropping support for Python 2 come next year. Do we care about Python 2 compatibility for the timeframes of what we're doing? Does it matter? I mean, I'm sure we got a lot of sick stuff in there that's there, but how much do we care? Do we want to?
I'm not sure that it matters right now. Okay, go ahead.
Type annotations, things like that. Do we want to start thinking about those things, or what's the direction with Salt in general with that? Sorry, that's all I wanted to get out.
I don't know what the direction for Salt in general. The PEP. When did annotations get added? 3.5.
Yeah.
So Salt's dropping 2.7 in Sodium, not before Sodium, is I believe how it's worded. So we have to support 2.7 for a little while. We're not going to do a whole lot of like code changes in this one. As far as like things that we should support, Salt still tests on 2.7. It still tests on 3. Well, I think it actually might be moving away from 3.4 now that CentOS 7 has dropped 3.4. But it's yeah, I'm not really worried about
3.4.
Windows uses 3.5.
Oh,
Yeah. I talked to Shane about that not that long ago. You should poke him and tell him that he should update it to 3.6. I forget why we didn't update it to 3.6 like a year ago. But there was a reason.
yeah, I'll ask him when I get into the office today.
Oh, I remember the reason. We would have to, remind him, because he will forget, he will have forgotten. When he updates the Python version in Windows, he also needs to update the kitchen.yaml file so that it references Py 3.6 instead of Py 3.5.
Gotcha.
That was the reason. It was just extra steps that we didn't want to go through at the time, especially since I was purely working on getting Kitchen Salt running for all of the test suite. And yeah, it would have caused problems. But yeah, so we don't really have to worry about 3.4. I'll worry about type annotations when we get there. I would love to have Salt Cloud type annotated though.
Okay, probably next steps.
Yeah, probably after the next release. I believe the next release is Sodium. Is it Neon and Sodium? I haven't memorized my periodic table in a while.
Isn't that Neon?
No, after Neon, yeah. Neon, yeah. Sodium's after Neon, and then Magnesium. Or Manganese. What's MG? Magnesium, yeah. So either Sodium or Magnesium. So we're currently planning for Sodium because Neon's already feature frozen, I believe. Is that correct, Tyler?
Neon is frozen.
Cool. Yeah. So we're focusing on Sodium, and then after Sodium, after Sodium, I believe there's going to be work to drop Python 2.7, and then that's when we'll start focusing on Python 3 specific stuff like type annotations and ripping out 6.
So that'll be aluminum?
Magnesium. Well, magnesium or aluminum, yes.
Okay.
No, yes, aluminum. depending on when Python 2.7 gets ripped out, because Python 2.7 and Python 3.4 will probably be ripped out at about the same time.
Okay.
Yeah, I know we shelved it for later, but I mean, there is the option to do the comment-based type annotation, even with, that will work with
Sure.
2.7.
But we can just do that. Like, we're not going to run MyPy against it. What we would do, because we'd have to go through and type annotate all of Salt. What we would do is we would just like type annotate. If we're not doing like function type annotations, we might as well just type annotate our Sphinx docs.
Yep.
But that's a whole other day. So I want to start with I will commit as an action item, if you want to write this down, Peter, that I will have tickets out for going through the drivers and an issue so that we can all come together and track what's going on or what needs to be in each driver. I'll ticket that by next Friday. It's my best guess.
I had a quick look at some of them here, and the Livert one has nothing to list available images, and it surely never will have one. So do we still want to keep those like that as a cloud provider, or?
Why wouldn't it have the ability to list images?
Just because Libvirt doesn't handle template images, it just knows how to handle VMs and storage pools and stuff like that,
Okay.
but no list of images.
Maybe we want to create categories, cloud providers versus cloud drivers or something.
We might have a category of things that they have to have, and a thing that are like, and then just a caveat, like if it's impossible, you don't have to do it. But it needs to be documented that it's not possible, because that's a command. So salt-cloud -- images, people will run that, and they will create a ticket on GitHub saying, hey, I can't do this with Libvirt. So we will need to document stuff like that.
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, so that's item one. That's the first goal. Is everyone okay with that as a first goal for this working group? Any objections? Okay. Second topic. I really want to move Salt Cloud out of SaltStack. Not just like, not separate it from SaltStack as a project, but there's this idea that you have to have all of Salt installed in order to create a cloud server, which is not true. You can use Salt Cloud to create cloud servers outside of Salt and just tell it not to deploy SaltStack on them. I have done some previous work on this.
Can you explain why that use case is attractive to you? Or to someone?
So are you familiar with so Salt Cloud originally was, like I said, Salt Cloud was originally created to just create cloud servers. I want to use it to create RDS clusters, queues, all those things. And Salt Cloud has this real anti pattern inside of SaltStack where we have map files instead of state files, which we don't need. If we can just use states, then we get the same benefit, and we just don't bootstrap anything else.
Okay, so wait, so sorry, let me try to get on the same page as you. Right. So by using states, you mean using the same SLS parser, or do you mean
exactly the same SLS parser?
And so that's how you want to achieve it, because right now maps are just YAML, right? There's no interpretation of them except as data.
Correct. I believe that you can use Jinja inside of them, because I think we just use load compile template to load them, but I'm not positive on that. And I'm looking at another project inside of the chat. It's called Fractus.
Sorry, that comment you made about being able to use Jinja is interesting, because I've got a hell of a lot of duplicated text in there, because I didn't think that was possible. I think we blow them out specifically because that can't be done.
Okay.
When would that have been?
It might not be done. Well, that's how we loaded them, but I'm not positive.
I can speak to that. It's possible to actually store your cloud maps in the pillar, and then you can use the Jinja that's available in the pillar to render your cloud maps.
Right. No, I do a lot of that. I'm just saying, like, it creates a combinatorial explosion of definitions of things if you want to predefine all. because you want to predefine all the possible launches that your users, whatever, might want, you create, 20 definitions of services. You want it across these availability zones. You might want to have these variations on it. You have to create it for different environments. That's not a total, it's not the cross product of everything available, but it is a combinatorial explosion of, I have, 20 settings, I get 4,000 lines out of it, right?
Yeah. I actually have a approach on that also, but I think it might be a little bit of a sidetrack. So,
Yeah,
but yeah, we should talk about that after.
SLS will, using the SLS renderer for that should produce the same results without the intermediary map files or just profiles being necessary is what I think I'm hearing.
Right.
There's the maps.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm not really against map files. They just seem like a reduction.
Well, I like map files a lot as a mechanism. I like the fact, I don't love them, but I like the fact that at least they answer a question for things like, I want to do parallel launches. How do I prepare it? Oh, I create the map file and then Salt handles it. Salt Cloud handles that.
Yeah.
That's
so all those things, state files handles all of that too. So you can create your state definition and then you can use extend in order to extend it and add your extra stuff like your availability zone or networks in specific areas and things. And then you can use the names definition where you specify the names of all the servers that you want to build using one state. And then you just specify parallel on that and they all build in parallel. So all that stuff is already in the state provider and is like really good. The stuff in Salt Cloud is just like its own thing and nothing else uses it. I think that moving to state files gives us the ability to, you can already do some of this stuff, especially if you use the Bodo module. So you can build cloud servers. You can't bootstrap them, and that's the problem.
I think I see what you're talking about. Yeah, and then also there's the whole orchestration layer too.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So you can build them in orchestration stage. You can build them. Oh my God, Cat, stay down. But yeah, seriously. Here, let's just raise the desk. So if you take a look at Fractus, you can already do this with, I did this about a year ago. You can, basically I took all of the Bodo and Bodo 3 modules that were in Salt about a year ago and moved them into their own project. So I've made sure that we can actually do some of this work. The next thing that has to happen is it has to be able to be broken out, but this is like, probably another year away from us actually looking at it.
So does that mean one of the things that Fractus and some of the work you're talking about would indicate happening from the AWS provider specifically would be that we would be removing the built-in driver for AWS and moving to Bodo 3 hopefully?
We would, so we wouldn't remove the AWS Salt Cloud driver. We would just move to Salt Cloud v2 is Fractus.
Not using a built-in driver, but using depending on like a vendor version of Bodo 3.
Yeah, we would be writing Salt execution modules and Salt states to create Salt Cloud v3 or v2.
So I'm still getting my head around some of the concepts around Fractus, but could you talk about what the sort of distribution and update model would be? It's decoupled from mainline Salt, but would it it would have its own release cadence?
Yes.
Would it be pinned to a specific Salt release? Would you be able to update it on the fly?
Yes.
Okay.
So right now, if you look in the setup.py file, there's a way. So Salt includes a way when you install a Python package, if you specify an entry point called salt.loader, you can specify directories, utils dir, modules dir, state dir, runner dir, directories that the runner loader loads files from. So you could do stuff, it's already doing this. You could basically take Fractus and pip install it on any Salt version back to 2016.3. And because it uses its own loader, you can just use those modules inside of those other versions. So the benefit is people can update modules at a faster release cadence than Salt does. And so they can whereas AWS, anytime AWS releases a new product or a new API, we can update and not have to wait 6 months for a Salt release.
Yeah, that's compelling. What about modularity within updates in Fractus? for example, if you needed like the very latest of a particular cloud provider, but you wanted something else to be static.
What do you mean? I don't follow that.
Basically, how are you going to pin the API of a version for product A, but you want to go forward on B? Is there going to be within it ways to pin parts of it and not others, or to have versions for parts and not others?
So, are you familiar with the Bodo modules at all?
I can't say that I am.
There's Bodo EC2, Bodo EFS, Bodo Elastic Cache, Bodo ELB, Bodo IAM, Bodo IO. Every AWS product gets a different Bodo module. So each of the cloud providers' products would have a different module and a different state.
So I should also mention that if you're not familiar with Bodo but you use AWS, you definitely should take a look at it, because that's sort of the official, in many ways, built on the same official driver library. Like basically Bodo Core is the reference for the reference implementation that pulls everything down from Amazon and sort of spits it out and turns it into Python, and makes it available to the CLI that everyone is supposed to use now that some of their older crap is dead. And so what you're saying is that we're going to be taking the reason for using Bodo or Bodo 3 is that you could theoretically just upgrade that and you would get the products into Salt for free. You would get anything Bodo supports. Is that the idea?
You wouldn't get it into Salt for free. You would still need to write a specific Bodo execution module to get it into Salt.
But you could then just check, as long as Bodo and Bodo Core at a certain release version, that you have that product available and the virtual will check out, or whatever the mechanism is going to be.
Correct.
And the expectation is that whether you're using Oracle or whatever, sorry, I don't know why Oracle comes to mind as a cloud. I guess they're in the news for whatever. Whatever cloud API you're using will have the same ability to bump the version of the driver from a Python driver, rather than having to write the low-level REST API and et cetera yourself.
It depends if they exist, yeah. Otherwise, it would be manually talking to the API. Like OpenStack doesn't really have a way to do what Bodo Core does. You have to. It kind of does, but not really. You still have to update OpenStack SDK, and then you have to interface with the SDK, and that's what we're doing. So we would split out a lot of the, like we'd have to make an OpenStack server thing, or it also allows us to kind of decouple. So what we're talking about now, where each cloud driver has to have its own thing, we would just have each cloud provider in the modules would have the things that are available on that cloud. So we no longer have to really standardize. That's the problem. The problem with Salt Cloud is it has this command line function that every single one of them has to have. With this other method, they're just execution modules. So you can run them as execution modules or runner modules through salt-run or salt target a minion and then call an execution module.
So basically Salt, currently cloud, hides the nature of the underlying execution module, runner modules, and we want to leverage them more to make things easier to write and to access.
That's the idea.
In a sense, to make it more salty.
Yes, exactly. The goal is, like I said, Salt Cloud's kind of an anti-pattern to the rest of Salt. Everything else, like you can run states on the Salt Master, you can run states on the Salt Minion, you run execution modules everywhere else. But you don't ever like run cloud modules really, except with the Salt Cloud command. And then you use map files. And some of it's been saltified by allowing you to use pillars a little bit, but it's all just, it's not really Salt. It's its own thing.
When you try to use pillars from the Salt Master, that gets weird.
Yes. In the past, I've tried to like execution modulize some of the Salt stuff. So there's a cloud state and a cloud module. So you can run like DigitalOcean .list whatever. And so you can do some of those things where you can specify a function and then include it inside of your Salt state. Like you can do a a cloud network underscore present and make sure your network's present as part of a salt state. It works really well, but it's really all shimmed together. It just adds another abstraction layer. It'd be great to just use the Boto modules to do it, so that they can also, the code can be spread out. It can be tested unit tested independently of other things. And yeah.
So question on that. I'm not sure if this is a good question or not, but what would be the relationship between Fractus, Boto, and something like libcloud?
We would write execution modules using libcloud to talk to other cloud providers.
Okay, so then AWS would just be kind of special cased in that it would go through Boto?
So we want to use, in my opinion, we want to use the official SDK if it exists, but like GCP doesn't have an official SDK. They have libcloud. They wrote their official SDK, they wrote in libcloud for Python. Or they did back when the GCP cloud provider was written.
Okay, yeah, that makes perfect sense.
It kind of depends. Like if they have an official SDK, we should use that. If they don't have an official SDK, we can use libcloud. Or if they're not in libcloud, then you would write one using like DigitalOcean. The DigitalOcean provider just makes API calls using requests or http.query, the http.query module.
Yeah, but it's like a defined ordered preference. That makes sense.
Anybody have any questions about that? That's a kind of like after Sodium discussion, and kind of like put that off for a little while until we have a win.
Not right away, but when we have the bandwidth for it. But when we have the bandwidth for it, I'd love to see some more examples of how you're talking about replacing maps with states.
I'll definitely write some up as part of I'll do a blog post next week about it.
Oh, okay. That was a lot more than I was asking.
Do you want me to put you down for an action item there, or is that more?
Yeah, do it. But for like, let's see, I'm going to be in California the week after, so let's set it for, and then July 4th weekend. Set it for by July 12th. I'll have it done.
About SLS for cloud.
Mm-hmm.
So are you thinking that all of these changes will be done only in Fractus, so we won't be updating like Salt Cloud itself? Is that
that's the eventual idea? So like we'll still be responsible for Salt Cloud stuff while we kind of do the migration thing, and then the goal is get AWS working, since everybody here uses AWS. I think I heard like some OpenStack, but AWS is the biggest cloud, so it makes sense to do AWS first. And then once we have like the AWS stuff, then we can go do other things. Or people can, like, this will be a way to like document it. And it makes more sense because like DigitalOcean has RDS, DigitalOcean has a CDN. That, fun fact, just uses the S3 API documentation in order to write it. They have a Kubernetes instance. So this is where your Kubernetes would come into this. We would write basically Fractus is the idea to get Kubernetes inside of Salt. You would create your AKS or GKE cluster using Fractus, and then you'd be able to interface with Kubernetes using the current Salt state modules that interface with Kubernetes to create pods and things.
Is Fractus meant to be standalone as well, or is that added on to Salt?
It's standalone, but if it's pip installed, so right now it's currently standalone. It can run on its own using like Fractus commands to build cloud servers, and it just imports Salt things. But when you pip install it, it supplies those same states inside of Salt. So you can just do the regular way that you use Salt. You can do both. That's why I want to do it this way.
Dan, do you expect as part of this work that the working group would eventually make a recommendation about deprecating the Salt Cloud command? Salt Cloud command.
Maybe. I don't know.
I mean, it doesn't sound like that's necessary at this point, does it? Because we're talking about having the same functionality I don't know that we need to keep it alive as is or that it needs to have an immutable command line. I'll tell you the truth. We almost, in my site, we almost don't use it because it doesn't work for us in a lot of ways. We use it to destroy things and to, remove protection before destroying. But everything else we do is on a built-in runner because we don't want to just launch an instance. We want to do like about 20 things to make it the instance we want for the type we want. And that's part of what gets specified in our pillars, and then what becomes the driver for that runner rather than just the maps.
Okay, we have 5 minutes left. Does anybody have any other things they want to talk about?
Kubernetes.
Kubernetes, yes. I think that's a thing that we should talk about much more down the line. I don't have a better answer for how to get it into Salt Cloud. It's unfortunately this like there's other stuff in Salt in order to do Kubernetes. There's clouds, there's regular states that interface with Kubernetes to create pods, spin up pods, spin down pods, monitoring what's going on. Don't feel like it fits in Salt Cloud as Salt Cloud exists right now.
Right, but with the future of what it's doing, of what we're doing here, splitting things out, it seems like certain parts of the task of doing that, it seems like you're saying we want the ability to say, hey, we have kube controller, we have the API of the controller, and we want to do something. And it seems like it fits that you would want to say from the same kind of API, I don't want to, launch an instance. I want to, launch a new pod. I have a deployment.
Right.
I want to understand more about what this is doing. I want to treat it like the same API as the other cloud providers, even if it is running on one of those cloud providers.
I'd be open to discussing it. That could certainly be, once we come up with a documentation, what it looks like.
Right. Yeah. I don't think you want to just say, here's kube control and here's Salt running kube control. Mm-hmm. But it does seem like you might want to say, I want to start a new pod. I want to have, I want this node tag this way. And because of that, I want to make sure I can use Salt Cloud to validate that I have the tags both in AWS or whatever else, as well as, at the Kubernetes layer, I want to see that it has its own internal tags. I want to be able to query it. I want to be able to look at the thing more programmatically. Again, my perspective is I want to write a runner that's going to access these things because that's what's worked for me. Maybe other people don't do the same thing. But if I'm going to do that, I don't want to have to also reach into a state.sls that's going to do an execution module on a node that's going to get me that answer back. If potentially I could just say, get me controller information, send this data to the controller, come back and come under the same cover because it makes more sense. Maybe it doesn't, but I mean, ideally I want these things to work easily. And I don't know, maybe I've got the wrong approach because this is still a little bit abstract for me. My next meeting is Kubernetes kickoff. So these things are on my mind.
Yeah, cool. Let's discuss that on Slack.
Cool.
Okay.
Yep.
Anybody have anything else?
Something to keep in mind as a principle as we go forward in this migration is that the work that we do should be friendly to wrap up in Formula.
Yes.
Yep. Agreed.
Okay, cool. All right.
Something that is on my roadmap is to somehow merge the libvirt provider in Salt Cloud with the virt modules.
Yes, that would be incredible.
How so? What was that?
The thing is that we have two pieces of code in Salt that uses libvirt. One is the virt module, and the other one is the libvirt provider in Salt Cloud. Mm-hmm. And both of them are just rewriting the same thing in its cases.
Yeah, they're two. They basically have the same set of code rewritten in a different organization. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I don't want from the Kubernetes side of things going forward, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess an example of that.
Yeah, cool. All right.
Oh, one last thing.
Go ahead.
You said that you wanted to take some inspiration from Terraform. Just as a follow-up, could you, like even on Slack, could you just explain a bit about the parallels, what you want to pull out of it?
So the idea is to use the fact that Terraform allows you to specify a basically the kind of like the structure of what you want. Like I want to create a VPC, and then I want to create a security group that's in that VPC, and I want to set it as the default security group for the VPC, all those things. And you're able to reference previously referenced things, right? But with me so far?
Yeah.
Salt has no way to do that really. It kind of does in that you can use slots now. The goal is to then take slots and make slots you be able to pull information out of previously run states. So you create a VPC in a state, then that state returns back the name of the VPC ID that was created, and then you can go in and pull that out of the results using slots, and then plug that into your security group definition as an on-the-fly thing, so that Salt generates all that stuff later. So that it's kind of a similar structure as Terraform. The difference is Salt is idempotent in the fact that if you say, hey, I want to change my security group, in Terraform, if there's certain things that if you change, instead of reconfiguring it, it tears everything down and rebuilds it. Salt specifically states, we don't do that. We focus on changing the way that things are as opposed to tearing them down and rebuilding.
So I see the promise of that because Salt exposes so much more at runtime. So you could potentially say, hey, I'm just going to bulk at this, and you can do the steps to fix this by running ABC, because you should know enough about that if you're destroying this or changing this, or it could be codified. So I can see that difference. So like, yeah, hey, you don't have to destroy a security group to change, in Terraform you get, oh, this is a security group, it has rules. Oh no, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to create security group rules and attach to it because I have some graph thing that it's violating. And so maybe it'll destroy the security group to do that because everything's changed, maybe not, you don't know. But you're saying in Salt, you could say, hey, I'm making that change, but what I really actually want you to do is take these specific actions to achieve that. The thing that I'm not sure about or clear about is like the use of slots, because it feels like you're talking about the ephemeral use of something that isn't as permanent as the state file or the state storage that Terraform has. But we're over time. I just want to like really get some more information about how that would work, because I haven't used slots. Every time I've looked at it, I said, well, I don't quite see why I'm going to use that. So
this is functionality that's not in slots yet, but it's a thing like that we would need to add.
Oh,
like
okay.
the ability to store state in another place and have a namespacing for it and then get it back, so you could replay that state over and over. So essentially, going from Salt's current, like I run and I have very little state except for maybe like a beacon or something that comes back and tells me about the system or whatever, and actually have like similar to Chef. Not to say it is, but perhaps more similar to Chef, where there's now node info stored somewhere that can be referenced and kept over time.
Kind of. Yeah, it's along those lines. I haven't completely fleshed it out yet.
Yeah, interested to hear more about that as it progresses.
Cool. All right, everyone, have a great day. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Yeah, don't release today.
Should it not?
Don't put that voodoo on us.
All right. Have a
Good
good
talking
one.
to everyone. I'll try to turn these into readable notes and condense it a little bit. I should have that in a couple hours.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Send me a PR when you have that, and I can merge it into the community repo.
Cool. Take it easy.
Yeah. Thanks for taking
Have a
notes.
good one.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.